So this panel is about why we do what we do, and we have a very diverse network up here in terms of the work that we do and the different ways that we can approach democracy. So we're going to start by just hearing from each of you the story of who you are and how that connects to what you do. So your why. What led you to the work that you do in a personal way? And I will start with Dee. And in service to my restorative circle practice, if you need to pass and come back to you, ask for what you need. That's okay.
Okay, is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, first of all, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am Dee Wooding, the founder of the Westwood Right Project. And RIGHT stands for Revitalization Initiative and Getting Housing Together. And this organization was created because, for those that are familiar with Westwood, it's the largest neighborhood in the west side of Dayton. And I grew up there and still own a home in this neighborhood. And if you've seen how it has declined over the years, it breaks your heart. There's about 48% senior citizens living there. And at one point, we had about 800 boarded up homes. And the neighborhood is going into irreparable harm. And I often joke about some of this sometimes. I say, we have more groundhogs than we have children in the neighborhood now. And I call it groundhogs gone wild in Westwood. So what we're trying to do in terms of democracy is empowering the people. Let the people know that you have the power to change these things. So we're creating this 100 Strong Voices for Westwood, and to let them know that collectively our voices can change this situation. So we can look at it in despair and say there's nothing we can do, or we can look at all of these boarded up homes and say there's an opportunity here. So out of the 800 boarded up homes, the city has done some wonderful things. They've demolished a lot of the properties, right? So that gives us an opportunity to build back better. So the Westwood, we just went right in. We said, we're not waiting on the city. We're not waiting on the county. We're just going to do the power of the people, and we just went and started buying up some of the lots, and we bought up one of the homes. And so now, some of those lots have now turned into beautiful garden spaces. So at James H. McGee in Hoover, so now when you turn the corner entering in Westwood, you see these beautiful flowers and all of our volunteers, and I see some out there in the audience, Allison and Tim, Malcolm. They have actually came out with their youth, different groups to help us do this work. And then we're working on a community mural right at that same space. So we're really just trying to let people know that we don't have to lose our power because we don't see other people helping us. Westwood matters, and we want to really just empower the people to be a part of the change that they want to see. So that's what democracy is for me. It's just like using your power within to do the good work and see the change. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're from Westwood. Is that West Dayton, right?
I'm sorry?
You're from West Dayton?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to share any of being from West Dayton? I mean, it's pretty obvious that's your community, but right. Is there anything that drove you to be involved in that beyond being from that community?
You always catch me on this question, why I got involved. Well, first of all, no one else was doing it. That was the big honest truth. But there is a lady, and rest her soul, she just passed away, Miss Jeanette. She was probably about 85 years old, and she had been the block coordinator for like 50 years. And this woman, I mean, she was real frail, and I was like, she would take her little lawnmower and her hedge trimmers by herself, walking 2 blocks to the very bus stop that I used to catch the bus at. But she was afraid to catch the bus there because of all the groundhogs and all the overgrown trees and shrubs. She was legally blind, and she said, I can't risk losing my good eye because of all the overgrown shrubbery. And she was out there doing this by herself. So I walked up there with her one day, and she had her little cane, and so she showed that to me, and I said, Jeanette, we're here with you. We're gonna get this done. And that bus stop has never looked better. And so I'm just really proud of her inspiring me because, like I said, she was 80-some years old, still out here cutting hedges and trees. So then that's when we started doing the cleanups, and it's just kind of grown from there. But again, like I said, it's really a way to leave a legacy of giving while you're living. I mean, because when I pass, I don't have nothing to give, so I might as well give while I'm here, you know? So I want to leave that, our community in a better condition than it was.
I love it. And I'm sure you're able to connect. There's a lot of people that do stuff in communities that they're not from, and it kind of has this, you're doing stuff to us or for us, but you don't really understand us. And I'm sure you're able to understand them on a level that other people may not be. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Pam, tell us a little bit of your story and the work that you do.
Hello, my name is Pamela Kona. I am the assistant pastor of Dominion Church of the Living God International. I pastor with my husband, and I am the founder and CEO of Curated Spaces, and I'm a fellow for the Democracy Fellowship cohort. And I'm so pleased to be here today with my fellow cohort members. Democracy to me, well, everything I do is going to be rooted in Scripture. I told you I'm a minister, so I've been preaching for 30 years. But Solomon says that we should seek justice, judgment, and equity, and that we should lift up our fellow man. You'll find that in Proverbs 1. So in that, Maya Angelou puts it plainly as when you give, and when you learn, teach. And so in that doing so, whatever I do has to be connected to who I am. It has to be rooted to my core values. I serve from my core values, but it also is connected to my gifts, talents, abilities, intellectual capacity, all those things that I think that I could serve and do good work. So with the fellowship project that I'm working on, it is for financial literacy and towards home ownership for first-time homeowners. And my reason behind that is that I grew up in a family that owned their home. And that was in 1970. My father bought a home in 1970 for our family. We always had a homestead. We had a neighborhood that my parents served, and we were taught to serve in our neighborhood. We knew our neighbors. We knew them by family, the Jones, the Grays, the Johnsons, the Reeds, and they were working class people. So when we say home ownership is the gateway to the middle class, I understand that because that's my lived experience. My family became homeowners and business owners. My father owned the store that served the community for the elderly who did not have transportation to go downtown to the grocery store. And my mother had a daycare for women who needed to go to work. Their children could be taken care of. So that's what I knew, and that's what I learned, and that was my experience. My husband, who I married, was Air Force for 23 years. So we had community, but we went from base to base. Our community was our military community. So you may have known someone, a family, for 1 or 2 years, and then they moved, or either you moved to the next location. That was our community. So even though we were transient, we still had community. When someone is renting from neighborhood to neighborhood, they're transient. So that sense of community is lost. That sense of stability for their family. So even though we were military, every place we moved, I made a home. So we unpacked those boxes, and you made a home. They had friends, shared experience. Not the same if you're, from what I have witnessed, if you're in a transient community, even the children suffer because they may go to a different school in 1 year, 2 to 3 different schools within one school year. So there's no foundation for community. So there's no foundation for even community engagement, which there's no reason for participating in the democratic process of voting. So when I moved to Dayton, Ohio in 2006, I wasn't sure, don't stone me, I wasn't sure Dayton was for me and was for my family. I wanted a place that was more progressive, that was more forward-thinking, what we're talking about today. And I was praying about that, and it came to me one day, why don't you help make it? Why don't you help make the community that you want? And so I began to seek out opportunity based on my lived experience. So I started going here to college. I've graduated from Sinclair 2 times. And I have an associate's in interior design, I have an associate's in communication studies. While as a student, I started a student-led organization, Scholars of Black Communication, which my lived experience, I laid it on top of communication theory. It became a student-led organization, which led me to be able to do deliberative dialogue sessions with the Kettering Foundation. So this is my second connection with the Kettering Foundation. Then I sought out another opportunity to be a part of the Dayton Human Relations Council. And what did we talk about? People who were discriminated, who were what? Renters. Women who were being sexually accosted for quid pro quo. You know, what are you gonna do? I'm not gonna fix your house unless you sleep with me. All those types of things. We heard numerous cases of that, even job discrimination, but this renting, just to be able to live peaceably in a home that you are paying too much for to live in anyway, that I'm going to be abused to be able to live in this space. Those things spoke to me. So we've been here now 18 years. This is community to me. This is home to me. After being married for 34 years, we finally found a place to put roots. And in putting roots there, then I want to do good work, and I want to serve. And I want to serve in a way that not only it serves others, but it serves me as well.
I love that.
I didn't finish telling you what my project was. So by the end of the project, the homeowners, the potential homeowners will go through a financial literacy program. They will be connected to a realtor, and they will be able to find them a home.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. I love it. I am a new homeowner in Northwest Dayton, and I just want to say that there are resources out there. I'm not going to tell y'all how much I put down on my house, but you would be like, how did you get away with that? Because it was really a blessing, and I just think that we need stuff like this and to have the community here because there are resources. It might have been one of the fellows that said Dayton is resource rich but access poor. I think that was Keisha. So credit to her, but that's so real. Like, we have the people that care, we have the resources, we just need more connection happening. So thank you for that work and for sharing. And Vibes, would you share who you are and what you do and what led you to what you do?
Yeah, I'm Vibes, and I'm actually not from Dayton. I'm from Mansfield. I came down here about 12 years ago now, and I loved it, so I stayed. Similar to like you, I just wanted to turn this place into a place full of people that love being here. So I've been working on that for a long time. I kind of grew up doing events with my mom. She's been a community worker for as long as she's been alive. So like I was raised into doing this work. Was always the first person at an event, was always the last person to leave. So there to support and build these momentums of these collectives like we have here, being a part of this experience, and was always about music and art and expression. And my dad is a jazz pianist, so music was always a part of my family. Grew up going to festivals and making music and jamming, and so a lot of what I think my work is to create the world that we're going to. And I think all this work of housing and access and systems change is to create a foundation and a momentum towards a world where we can like sing and dance together, right? Like, what is the whole point of this? If not to like celebrate together how far we've come and how far we're gonna go. So my work is to create more of those opportunities for people to root into those structures that we're building and we're structures that we're going to. So that's music festivals, that's benefit concerts, that's events like this. That's every time that we can come and be together is us being in the world that we're building together. And that's kind of like the work that I am called to do, and that's the work that I've been doing.
Awesome. Do you want to share a little bit about the Honey and Sage project that you did through the fellowship?
Yeah, through Kettering Fellowship as a fellow with my fellow fellows. I did not come up with that. I don't know who did, but I'm going to say it. We put on, this year was the 4th annual Honey and Sage Bonfire, and it is a music, arts, and healing festival, a gathering of sorts to come together, have our voices be heard, and have our songs be sung together. And so this year was actually out in Springfield, and we had about 300 people come out. There was about 60 campers, and about half of those campers have never camped before. So we got a bunch of people out there into the nature, into doing off-the-land stuff together, and it was a great opportunity to start a new group, start more momentum towards, sustainability, towards expressing ourselves together, and, building the kind of world that we want to see.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Destiny Brown. I'm currently serving as community organizer with Advocates for Basic Legal Equality, which is a social justice law firm. In that work, I've founded the Dayton Tenant Union, which is a group of residents and community members who've come together to advocate around better housing rights, better housing landscapes, solutions that are community-driven, and empowering residents who are typically impacted and not involved to get involved and to have a say-so in their communities and what that looks like. So, okay, thank you. But the background is, my background is in community health space in general, so served for a while as a community health worker with focus on infant and fetal and maternal mortality, particularly for women of color. And then that work naturally starts to identify a lot of the underlying issues in a lot of these spaces, having to do with inequity and disparities and policies that perpetuate it. And as I've worked with tenants in the tenant union, have seen the fundamental of housing and how housing has not only been a determining factor for the well-being of families to the points of a lot of our fellows have mentioned already, but also how housing was traditionally used to further the gap and to really to ensure that the wealth gap continued and widened over time. So it's important to me, and a lot of my why is that I'm a mother. I've had challenges not only in the spaces of health and equity as a Black birthing mother, as a Black woman in general, but also concerns and housing instability, and have seen the impact of that on a family structure. And then once you know better, you do better. And a lot of my why is that I see myself in a lot of the people that I encounter, the experiences that I've been fortunate to overcome, they are standing in the middle of. And I know there were times that I was hopeful for somebody to come along and just tell me that this doesn't last forever, or that you will survive this, and there is a brighter day on the other side of the struggle you're currently in. And I think it requires people who have walked through that to be able to speak to that in a way that can really empower a person. So a lot of my why really has to do with my own lived experiences, I think, as is true with many people. But I truly see housing as a fundamental. To Minister Cohn's point, you can't have a thriving community, or it is very hard to stabilize community if you have a transient community who, if you look at the difference between renters and homeowners, their stability, their net worth, the teen pregnancy rate, their high school rates, like all of these things are impacted by neighborhood dynamics. And I personally like to work smarter, not harder, and I don't like dealing with symptoms versus the root causes of issues. So that's what it is for me.
Beautiful, thank you. I was thinking in the first panel about when the question came up of how do we get people to start doing things when they're in it and they're not able to think about certain things. And I was thinking about the power of storytelling in helping other people to see their way out of things. a lot of people tend to look at people that are on a stage or people that are in leadership positions and just assume they either have something I don't have, they're more privileged, or whatever, the situation might be. And I think there's such a power when we tell our stories to how we got here, so people can know that, see themselves in us. So does anyone want to share? I'm not going to necessarily go through. I want it to be more conversational, but what ideas do you have of how do we get to ourselves to tell more stories? How do we get those opportunities to connect with the people that need to hear our stories so that they can be inspired by the experiences that we've had and how we use those experiences to better our community and things like that?
Well, as a communication major, so I think I could kind of speak to that a little bit. You could start by even sharing in one-on-one conversation. A lot of times we don't, because we've overcome that, and it could be something where we left out of, where there's a great deal of stigma attached to that. So I was a mother at 17, and I married at 19. I didn't come to college. I graduated here twice until I was 36 years old. I tell that story a lot of times because people will feel as if this is how I started, then I'm stuck here. And I was determined to complete my high school education. I was determined to go to college. I married a military man. We moved several times, but I never stopped evolving. So when you share your stories, people can come unstuck, even if there's stigma attached. So if you say that you are an unwed teenage mother, that has a great deal of stigma attached to it, even in 2024. So I have a blog. I share that. I'm on probably my 4th broadcast. So my podcast now is Sunday Mornings with Pamela. We have to learn how to be transparent and vulnerable enough to share with others, even if it's just in line somewhere and you see a young mother and you say, it's going to be all right. And I've been there. Or I could meet someone and I could discern they want to go to the next space. You know what? It's never too late to go back to school. I didn't go until I was 36 years old. And on the 28th of September, I will receive an honorary doctorate degree. So when we tell our stories, we'll tell our triumph. That's wonderful. I'm blown away by that acknowledgement. But I don't forget that I had to rock my baby at midnight and then do my homework at the same time. I do not forget that my first job was McDonald's, and I was proud because I could buy my baby clothes and diapers. So when we share our stories, we remove stigma. When we share our stories, we remove shame, and we also give hope. So I have a podcast, I have a blog, I'm a minister. I do say that a lot. And anywhere someone would engage in conversation with me, I'm open to have it. But I did not always have that. I'm going to say this because this is why we don't share. Because once we can make it out, we don't want to share because we are still ashamed. And we won't allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to even see the opportunity. I was in my 20s. It was a young lady I met at an immunization clinic. I was getting my daughter immunized, and she's 28 years old, so that's how long ago this was. And I wanted someone to share goodness with. Lord, I want someone to share your goodness with. This lady came to me, and she sat next to me, and she said she had a baby, and she was getting ready to have another baby. She was deciding whether she wanted to have an abortion or not. Through the lens of judgment, I did not give her my story. I wanted to run from her because I wanted to run from 16-year-old Pam. And so I didn't tell her my story. I didn't encourage her whether she could go through another pregnancy. I didn't encourage her that she would have grace to make the decision she needed to make for her life. I said nothing. And when I got out of that clinic, I had the nerve to get in my car and say, Lord, you didn't send me anyone to share your goodness. He said, but I did. I cannot tell you how many times I have wept over that missed opportunity. And I had to go repent because I did not take the time to share, to tell her, this too shall pass. I didn't do it because I was ashamed. So when we get out of our own ways, our own way, we get out of our own selves and our personas and our roles and our titles and our degrees and just be real, human to human, we will share our stories.
I love it. Yeah, I think initially maybe there was an air of like, what do we need to do more to have those types of opportunities? But you're so right. It's like, how do we do that in our day-to-day life with the people that God puts in front of us? So thank you. Destiny, anything you want to share?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying shame because there, even in the previous panel today and talking about it, when we're talking about people who are not generally participants, maybe in the voting process, in their community action opportunities or any of those things, what I've seen, particularly working with tenants, is there is a shame about my living condition. There is a shame about what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing. And the shame is what keeps people silent about what they're suffering. And silence doesn't allow people to have a shared experience that they can advocate together around. So when I've, in having a conversation earlier, and then my own experience, just total transparency, I was sitting at the table with a wonderful woman over there who asked me what brought me to Dayton. And when I've only probably in the last year or so have started telling the truth about what brought me to Dayton. And there's shame attached to it. And a woman is going through domestic violence and you have to uproot and you have to figure out life. And somebody's like, oh, you're from Columbus, what brought you here? And I'm like, a new job. I don't want to say that I was running from a domestic violence situation or that, that was the scenario, because then there's a perception of maybe who I am. I have my own perceptions, maybe be they true or not, about what you're going to think when I say that to you. So it's going to keep me silent about my experience. The downside to that is that if there's a woman in the room who needed to hear that, to give her the courage to speak, then to your point, I've missed the opportunity to encourage that. But it takes my own healing and my own comfort to be willing to do so. I think when we talk about the importance of telling our story is, and this is something I tell my daughter, because you will have a situation that will give you shame. And I see it in tenants when, oh, I got roaches, I got mice. I don't want to tell nobody. You can't get help if you don't say anything, first off. And then you don't know, oh, my whole building has mice. This isn't just a me problem. But the shame will keep you silent. And I've seen how the ability to be honest allows that shame to be placed where it belongs. So instead of me feeling bad about an abuser and me feeling like I have to alter the story of how I arrived here because of their actions, let me be honest and say, this is what happened, but I'm thriving and doing well. But that's not my shame to hold. They should be ashamed of their actions. And it's the same for tenants. It's the same for people who are suffering from the effects of discrimination and equity issues and all of these things. This is not your burden. You are suffering from shame that should belong to someone else, but you're carrying it because you don't know how frequent the issue is.
That's really good. So both of you really just shared a very real, tangible example of why and how the personal is political. Do Dee or Vibes have any other examples, whether your own or that you know of?
I think to their points that they made, we do carry a lot of shame. Growing up in Westwood, we lived in deplorable conditions. But the community was still a sense of community. But inside our homes, it was broken. Abuse. So when I see the community going down the way it is, I'm just like, God, there's just no way I can just turn my back on the most vulnerable population, senior citizens. It's like our first secretary, she would literally be sitting in her living room. She had an aneurysm in her heart, and she could only sit in her living room, and her only view was this dilapidated home. And I just thought, in your golden years, that's all you get to see. Can you imagine how that would just affect you every day? And I just thought, but we didn't grow up like that. I mean, our home was broken, but the neighborhood wasn't. But to see it go down and decline like that, it just pulled something out of me. Because the lady, like I said, Miss Jeanette, she was 80-something doing this work. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I got a lot more to do. So, but I say that to say, and then everybody say, how are you going to really transform this community? How are you going to bring back these houses and these garden spaces and make affordable housing for this community? And we just said, lot by lot, house by house, block by block. And Nelson Mandela said it best, everything seems impossible until it's done. We just got out there and did it. I mean, you thank God for the strength and the energy, and we went and bought the lot and just transformed it. And it's like, so you see it, but it was because of the brokenness that I grew up with. And I was like, we can do better than this. Come on, we can do this. And if me, because I'm gonna be honest, before working on this project, I have a government career, I'm working with the government, but I couldn't even, or I didn't think I could, put 2 screws together. Like when I go to the store and buy something from my house, I would get the floor model, because I'm like, there's no way I can put this together. But when we got this home, I mean, this home was dilapidated. Y'all seen it. The one room was burnt out. And I went, and I was like, okay, this is what we gotta do. We don't have enough money, but we gotta do it. I went and got a sledgehammer. Had never picked up a sledgehammer ever in my life. And I said, okay, what we gotta do? We gotta knock out the wall. We don't have no money to pay a contractor, but we gonna knock out this wall. So I took the sledgehammer. Thank God nobody was on the other side of that wall. I took that sledgehammer to swing that wall out, and it just literally flew somewhere. But, but what I'm saying is that it gave me some strength, and it's the most rewarding work I have ever done, is to now see this home. It's a beautiful 3-bedroom home. Now we have a family that's, the home is under contract. This will be her first time owning a home. So it was just like, to see where we've come from and what God has given each of us, a talent to do more in our community. So that's the story that I would like to share. Thank you.
Vibes, any stories that come to mind when it comes to the personal being political?
I don't know a story as much as what comes to mind for me is that things like shame, the stuff that we carry is like shame, as you said, only really exists because of another. So like the things that we carry emotionally and on a personal level like are contextualized in a community, in a collective. And that is inherently political. It's like being alive is political. And so the choices that we make together and as individuals kind of affect each other. So everything on a personal level is political because being an individual can only exist if there's other people around it.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So there might be some people, we have all been through things, the most privileged of us to the least privileged. But I am sure that there are people in the room, myself included, who may sometimes feel like, well, I haven't had it that bad, but I have a heart to help. So how do I connect with people who I'm not able to share an experience, or maybe I don't feel like I can? How do I connect to people who are in need?
I think to jump in on that one, I think, just show up, be in the room. Something that helps, bring perspective to things like shame is being heard, that you're not alone in that these experiences do extend outside of you. And so it's either like you can show up in the room and be ears to listen to someone else's story, or you can hold the space so that people may come in and share their story. Yeah. And those are 2 really easy ways to just get involved and show up and hold space. Yeah,
show up and hold space. That's pretty practical. What else?
I think we could be more empathetic when we actually we could have a perception of why someone is there where they are. We could have a perception how they got there. We can even characterize them in a certain way as not doing all they could do not to be where they are without being empathetic. And so I think when we become void of judgment, when we show up in a space, we are helpful. I think when we don't, we're disingenuous. We could, if we do have more privilege, we could do it out of guilt, that why we are where we are and how did I escape that. But when we show up for someone or in a space to serve, then that's the space that we can come out of, that where we, even if that's not our lived experience, that we can lend whatever resources, whether it is help, whether it's organizing, whether it's particular giving a space, or whether it's even passing on resources, that when we serve from a space of non-judgment, that creates a space where people can access, they feel comfortable accessing because they're not being judged, and they're being treated as on the level field with everyone else. They're not looked down upon because they need support, because they need to access a resource, or because they have a problem or a situation. So as servants or servers to the community, we have to go in with the objective of helping to create equity, not adding to by positioning ourselves as a higher or above.
I would say we could maybe be more welcoming to everyone, and that we need you. We need your help. Like if you're, we're in Westwood, but if you're in Oakwood, if you're in Kettering, even though you're distanced from us, still know that this is a community that needs you. Because I know I hear that a lot. People say, well, do you think they'll welcome us in your community? And I'm like, absolutely. Because again, there's a 48% of senior citizens in Westwood, and sometimes we just don't have that capacity. So we really rely on a lot of volunteers. So we want you to know that you are welcome, and we'll make you feel welcome. And we work with a lot of different groups that come outside of Westwood because they really care. They just want to feel welcome and know that we need them. So just to let everybody know, you're welcome and we need you. So.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the barriers that exist. And I know I think there was a workshop kind of related to this, but obviously everybody didn't get to be a part of that. I don't know if any of you were a part of that. But let's just talk a little bit about barriers, and then we're going to talk about the flip side of that, which is what does it look like when there are no barriers? We're going to dream a little. So what are some of the barriers that you see, and we can kind of just go down the line to more people feeling like they belong? Because we've talked about democracy, and some people are like, what does that even mean? But when we think of democracy in terms of belonging and community, what are the barriers that exist?
Well, to be honest with you, that's a long history of that. Just recently, we were trying to apply for a grant, and our proposal was themed around redlining. And everybody went to the exhibit and all the things around that, but I was asking, so what were the solutions? Because I'm going to be honest, I am tired of talking about the past and the problems. I want to get to the solutions. So then you look at some of the barriers that we still address. So there's dollars out there, but those dollars are not coming to some of these Black and brown communities. That's just being real talk. And I can say that because, I mean, we apply for these things, and it's just not. And there's other barriers, like there could be leadership. I think when the University of Dayton did their study on Westwood in 2013, they cited there was no leadership. So we're not even at the table. So they don't even know that we need money to build these new homes because no one's asking for it. So that becomes a barrier. The community itself, like I said, we have a lot of senior citizens. That can become a barrier because they may not have the capacity. Like, they're not here. I mean, getting here could have been a challenge for them. So there's all different kind of barriers, but we can overcome all of those. I think if we just get enough people who really, really say, yes, these neighborhoods matter. We want to see this community developed. And I think we can overcome all of those barriers. And I just truly believe that because, again, if this small nonprofit, if we've done what we've done, imagine if others came in support of that effort. I think we could overcome all those challenges.
Pam, your turn.
My turn. Barriers to access sometimes can be tangible and sometimes they can be invisible. You don't really realize that it's a barrier because it is unspoken. And so when you, I would say, when we talked a lot in the last panel about misinformation, to access to information, to even knowledge of understanding the right questions to ask, the right resource to access, to even the right place that you can position yourself to even say that I want to help. I think we can remove and dismantle barriers with effort and education. I think that if we just continue to say that that is a barrier, it will still stand. I want to move the conversation to removal of barriers.
Yeah.
I want to change the conversation from disparities to equity. So because it's possible, there's enough resources and information and people and communities and nonprofit organizations that we could move past what are the barriers. If we stay stuck, that we're talking about barriers opposed to having solution-based conversations, then that's a barrier, right? So that's an untangible barrier because we're not even talking about it. It's that for lack of a better word, the elephant in the room. You're telling me that there's resources available. I don't even know how to ask.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know who to go to. You're saying to me that vote for this candidate. I don't even know what they even stand for. I don't even know if they're even concerned about me in that way. But to say that sounds misinformed. So even that's a barrier. When you say register to vote, how do I even know my vote matters? How do I even know that my voice is being heard? How do I even check that? And so those are the invisible barriers, but they're also this position where we have these barriers and we talk about them and we don't move past to solutions. And this type of conference, a solution to that would be we could disseminate information. If we say that there's so much misinformation on the internet and social media, there was misinformation and negative propaganda before the internet. It's an easy escape. That's a barrier. Just to say, oh, it's social media, it's social media, it's social media. Well, when did social media come around? It wasn't around when the propaganda was out that had African Americans being presented as Sambo, or the Irish Americans being presented as apes. That was not the internet, but that was out there. So if we forget those things, we can easily just push it off on something. And that's really a lazy way. That's what I'm talking about, untangible barrier. That's lazy. So if we say we have the internet, let's disseminate the most accurate information and resources that we can. That's no longer a barrier. That we're saying we're resource rich, but access poor, or however we put that, then do we put it on billboards? Do we put out flyers? Do we put it on posters in the bathrooms? Where do we disseminate this information? Because then that's no longer a barrier. That's no longer a tagline that we can continue to say.
Yeah. You said effort and education. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, I think if we put enough or as much or more, ideally, effort and education into the resources that are out there and the possibilities and the solutions as we do talking about the barriers, we'll be all right. We will be all right. Any other things that haven't been named or solutions that you see to barriers, if we want to go there?
I definitely think being in the know is a huge advantage on moving through the systems that we have. But I think another one is time is a barrier. And I say, like, one way to get involved in the community is to show up. When do we have time? Like, we in this room have created a situation for ourselves to be lucky enough to be here right now. Like, I'm not going to lose my job by taking off Friday. Like, all these different events and gatherings and ways to share our stories and to experience joy in song and dance, all these things are time. Like, the barrier for learning a new skill is time. That's the currency. And oftentimes, there's so many people that have 2 jobs. I think, as Peter was saying, like, how are we going to care about voting when we can't, like, have water? Because we're working and all of these things. And I think one solution to that is everyone has their own schedule, has a lot going on, and one, like, solution to kind of pair that with being in the know is to create, as community organizers, create more opportunities out there in the calendar that we all have, so that if I can't make it Friday, I can still go Monday, and, like, have more of these opportunities to learn and share stories and be in the know and learn what rules you need to navigate to get, like, not messed up about rent, and to know who you're voting for. And so one way to kind of break through the barrier of time and being in the know, like education, is just to create more opportunities. And when we have more opportunities, we have more ways to show up. And when we show up, we make it easier for ourselves to continue showing up. So it's kind of a momentum thing. And anything that we can do to kind of create a foundation where it makes it easier for people to show up, that's the solution.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about, like, I'm all about integration, if you know me. You hear me say that word a lot. Because sometimes it's like, okay, so yeah, we need to add more things to the calendar. Is that the solution, or is that a sustainable solution? So how do we do exactly what you said, but with what we're already doing? You know, how do we integrate these types of conversations in the events and things that we're already doing? I was just throwing that out there. You don't have to answer that, but you're welcome to.
I think I'm thinking in real time here. Yeah, it's collaboration. It's the more that we know what else is going on in Dayton, the better that we can center ourselves to be an additional opportunity that doesn't overlap with the other opportunities. And so, like, an event that might speak to me might not speak to you. So me knowing what you're doing and you knowing what I'm doing is going to help us walk in parallel, walk in synergy, rather than, you know, crossing paths and stepping on each other and kind of, like, being just noise at that point.
Go ahead, Destiny.
Just to speak to barriers, one of the biggest barriers that I see in my work and in other spaces is that the systems of inequity and racism were made to self-maintain and evolve and self-perpetuate. So I think I perceive that as one of the biggest barriers of our community, is because equity and issues of equity exist in every lane of life for people. Issues of racism exist in every lane of life for particular people. So the unfortunate side of that is a lot of majority of the people who are victims of that system don't know that they are. And how it is so hard to fight a giant that you don't even know you're under their foot. you don't even know you're living in that space because everybody you know is living there with you. So it's hard to perceive that that I am under the weight of a system that I have no control over truly how it impacts my life, my neighborhood, my family well-being, or any of those things. So to me, when we talk about a barrier, it is that people are subject to that system, and not only is the system thriving, it is evolving, maintaining, and finding new ways to do what it does. So when I also don't like to just talk about the barriers. We know what these barriers are. I think sometimes we're learning the new ways that they are living now, but they're very much still the same. So when we talk about solutions, two things in particular I think about is that you confront, and it used to be one or the other in my mind, is that you confront the system or you make a new one, but it's both. Is that you have to confront the system and you have to work on a new one. So I think that in any movement in time and when changes took place, it wasn't the voices of the impacted people that really made that change happen. And despite how many of them gathered together, how strong their voices were, if they were perceived as valuable, they wouldn't have been in that situation to begin with. So it took the voices of other people who did not have the shared experiences that they did of being victimized or being divested in before people started to care. And so when we talk about solutions to those barriers, is that people who are not impacted work to confront that system as well. And those people also work to create a new one. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked about how we all know we talk a lot about barriers, and I think everybody is ready to start talking about solutions, and we have a lot of solutions in this room. What I love to do is spend more time thinking about and feeling into how things look and feel when there are no barriers, you know, whether it's to housing or well-being or whatever the things are. So I'd love to just hear personally from each of you, what does a community where there aren't barriers to whatever the thing is look and feel like for you?
I think one thing I've talked about with the other fellows a lot is it seems to me that there's, to simplify our work, that there's three sections of our work, which is capacity building, systems change, and community building. And so if you look at that like a bridge, at the beginning of the bridge, there's capacity building. That's education, that's housing, that's access to all of our resources, that's being in the know of what's available and how to, you know, move across the bridge, or even that the bridge is there in the first place, that there is a future. And then there's the bridge itself. There's systems change, which is kind of like, I would say, well-beingism from Peter is a version of systems change, like looking at how we define success as a collective and how we face down these institutions that only seek to perpetuate themselves. And on the other side of the bridge is kind of the world that we're going to, which is the world that we can imagine together. To borrow from Amaha, like the people that are of those systems are imagining that system. So in order to combat that system, we have to reimagine something. It's like a battle of imagination, in his words. And so for me, my work is on the other side of the bridge. It's where we're going. It's what all this work is for, is so that we can express and share and grow and have empathy and dance and create together. And if we can do that in a way on that side of the bridge that supports the people at the beginning of the bridge, then that's even better. And I think that's kind of what I've been working towards.
Yes, it's important work. Dee?
I think I would say, when I look at what we've done in Westwood with these projects, yeah, I could have focused on the barriers and said, oh, this is going to be hard. But I didn't care. I was just like, this has to be done. It has to be done, so let's just go do it. So doing nothing wasn't an option, right? So you take that off the table, you go figure out what needs to be done, you just get your hard hat. I went and bought a hard hat, and I just started getting it done. So even though there were still barriers there, I didn't see that. I didn't let that block the blessing that I know that could be on the other end. So I would just challenge everybody to go deep inside of you and see how you can give to help another community out, because you may not have those same issues in your community. And just go find your skill, your talent, because I used to want to sing in the church. I always thought, Lord, I want to sing in the church, right? But that wasn't my gift, because I even went to take singing lessons, and the lady said, no, you don't have it. She didn't even want to take my money. But I was hurt because I really wanted to sing in the church. I wanted to be in the choir. But I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I said, Lord, what gift do I have, Lord? Just show me. So it was this was it, working in a nonprofit space. And like I said, it was just amazing. I've never planted a tree before. The lady came out, showed us how to plant a tree. I almost fell in the hole because I was like, I got to keep digging. But it was just like, I didn't care about the barriers. I didn't care about nothing else. All I knew is that this work has to be done for our community. So let's do it together. Yes. So I don't want to think about no barriers. I just want to know what the solutions, how do we come together as a whole community and get this work done.
I love it. It is 2:15, so if I could maybe just get like a word that reflects for you what this community can look like, what's possible.
Capable.
That's the word. What about you?
Growth.
Okay, awesome. All right, y'all, it's been real. Thank you for sharing your stories with us.